would like to talk to you or introduce you to a concept that is currently going on, mainly in the biochemistry field. And the concept or the idea is to develop and use computer games, video games actually, to make people more interested in science, in research, and particularly if you work kind of in your own research field, in order to make people aware of your own research, and at the same time also use the crowd of people that are playing those games to use their resources kind of for your own purposes, for your own research purposes. And the reason why this is so interesting or why this is so promising is actually, I mean, why people are interested in those gamers is very simple. There are many, many gamers around in the world. So, first of all, I mean, in terms of the number, I mean, can you imagine 3.5 billion hours of gaming is done every week worldwide. So this is a huge number. And at the same time, so from those 3.5 billion, and what this basically means is that 500 million are actually playing video games 1 hour per day. And those video games can be either on consoles, back at home, or it can be, on smartphones and so on. And interestingly, in the US actually, there are 5 million people who play 40 hours per week video games. I mean, 40 hours, this is the normal job, I mean, the time that you spend on your job every week. And they are spending this, I mean, I guess they are also working, but I mean, they are spending so much effort and so much time also in gaming. And obviously, who gains a lot from this? It's the gaming industry. So $22 billion did the gaming industry in terms of revenue just in the year 2013, and this is really increasing rapidly, and in particular now with the smartphones. And at the same time now for our purposes, actually, for the scientific community, this is, I mean, this whole figure is really like amazing, and we have to make use of this, again, for advertisement, and then also for kind of using this as a resource for our own purposes. So important is that, so among the different games that are played by the gaming community, by the large gaming community, 30%, so this yellow bit here in the ring, 30% are games that are somehow related to the gamer's intellect. So it can be, for example, a puzzle game, or it can be a board game, and so on. So stuff that where really like your intelligence is kind of challenged, and where you can make use of the gamer's intelligence for your own purposes. So this is really important. And now there is a game that I would like to introduce you now. And this game has to do with a specific problem in biochemistry. And this specific problem is the problem of finding the right fold or finding the right structure of your protein. So why is this very important? So proteins are, first of all, the main molecules, the main macromolecules in your body. So they do all the job that you kind of need in order for your body, for your cells to function. So, and important is that the function of the proteins is encoded by their structure. So every protein has its unique structure. So you can, you can appreciate here on the right. So this is a protein that sits in the membrane, and it is kind of a tunnel. It looks like a tunnel, right? So it is a channel for certain molecules to enter the cell or to exit the cell. So this, in order for the channel to work, it has to actually fold, or has to get the structure that you see on the right. Now important is the structure of a protein is encoded by its sequence. So a protein consists of a sequence of amino acids. I'm not going to explain now what an amino acid is, I hope you know this. So it's very important that the sequence is actually a 1D object. So it is a linear object, as you can see on the left. And this left object has to be now folded, or has to rebend and reshape itself in order to get the structure that you see on the right. Now, very important is what people have figured out actually is that this structure that you saw on the right is a structure based on, when you do the calculations for all the different conformations and for all the different structures that this linear stretch of amino acid sequence can obtain. So these would be all the red points here. The structure that is the real structure, so the structure that you see in the cells, is the structure that you see on the bottom of the plot. And what this plot simply shows you is it plots the energy of the structure to the similarity, so you know the true reality, you know how the structure looks like. And we just simply plot here the similarity of the structure to the biologically relevant structure. And what this basically says is that the structures actually that the cell has, or that the proteins are folding into, are at an energy minimum. So if you calculate the energy of all the different conformations, the true structure will be the one that is in a global energy minimum within the landscape of all the different conformations that are possible. Now, for us, how people actually solve this problem of protein folding is they usually solve the structure, so they have experimental methods to determine the structure of the protein. But the problem is with those experimental methods, they are very expensive and they are really tedious and they require lots of work. In the past, you spent a whole PhD, so 4 or 5 years, just to solve one of those structures that I, for example, showed in the previous slide. Nowadays, it's actually better, but still, it is a really tedious task. So it would be really cool if you could do this computationally. So if you could predict the structure just based on this linear stretch of amino acid, if you could predict, okay, so I have this linear sequence, which structure or which conformation will it fold into? So this would be really cool. But the problem is that the computational prediction is very, very hard, and it's basically because this linear stretch can be really folded in so many different ways that it's almost impossible to really predict just based on the sequence of the structure. And just as a number, an average protein can have 10 to the power of 143 different conformations. This is a number with 143 zeros. It's really massive, and there is no computer that can actually predict this for normal. That can predict from a sequence the real structure of a protein based on this large amount of conformations. And that's the point where now video gamers come in. And because you can design a game that does exactly this, that uses the intellect and that uses the capabilities of humans to recognize shapes and to recognize certain structures visually, in order to figure out actually which conformation is the right conformation, or which conformation looks okay, looks correct, and based on that you can use then the gamers actually to predict the structure of any protein based on only its sequence. And I would like to show you now just a 5-minute short video done by Nature. I hope it's anyway. I think part is missing. Anyway, so I hope just enjoy it. It's 5 minutes long, and the game will be introduced. And really, what is also really cool, 2 gamers will be introduced, and especially one which is really amazing. I will talk about her just after the video has finished. So let's start.
When you've got it right, you see your protein moving and changing shape, and your score rushes up, your own player name rushes up through the ranks, and your adrenaline starts.
It's like being a scientist when you get a paper published. That 10% of euphoria is supposed to take you through the 90% of banging your head against a brick wall. But
people put a huge amount of energy into playing games on computers, so I think projects like this can channel that energy into solving real-world problems, and that's a way in which everyone can contribute that really hasn't been there before.
I'm Suzanne Helitsky, and I'm an administrator in Manchester, and my folding gaming name is also Suzanne.
hello, I'm Charlie. I'm a bench technician, and in my spare time I play Fold It. I used to be number 2 in the world, My gaming tag is Charlie Fort's Conscience, and I'm a member of the Contenders. It's essentially a 3D jigsaw puzzle. You're given a protein which comprises of a backbone and individual side chains, and by moving these around, changing the interactions, your score either goes up or down.
Scientists are interested in working out the three-dimensional structures of proteins because they help understand how the proteins carry out their jobs, what they do inside cells. The principle behind the prediction of protein structures on a computer is that we've known for a long time that all the information needed to determine the structure of a protein is in the amino acid sequence of the protein. So from genome sequences, we can translate those into amino acid sequences using the genetic code, and now we have this amino acid sequence. Turns out that the structure that proteins fold to is almost always the lowest energy structure for that amino acid sequence. So the structure prediction problem then is finding the lowest energy structure for that amino acid sequence. And the reason it's hard is that there's so many different possible configurations. Big advantage that a human has is they can look at a complicated thing like a big protein and sort of zoom in on the regions that probably most need to be reworked. And we give them visual cues. The regions that are high in energy locally are red, and so they sort of stand out that, well, you need to do something here.
To start with a protein that is so misshapen, it's ugly and it's red, and to work through that to a beautifully streamlined structure where it's symmetrical and things are tucked in and nothing is hanging out of the sides. Yeah, that is sort of the goal, and that's what I like doing, to sort of help it in some ways to sort of be what it should be.
A really good folded player, I think, needs a number of skills. Problem solving is obviously one of them. I think a slightly addictive personality, a little bit of stubbornness thrown in, and a little bit of luck on top. You don't necessarily need to have a scientific background to play, you just need to know what works and what doesn't. And you can learn that within the game itself.
I'm an administrative worker in the rehab team. I'm just answering telephones, working on bespoke computer programs, interacting with staff. It's very repetitive. When I go home, I become a different person. I just like to measure myself against something, and it's given me something that my everyday life hasn't given me. It's to just use abilities I didn't know I had.
For me, it's a guilty pleasure, and yet here I am involved in something that has real relevance in the scientific world. It makes you feel very proud of what you do, which is essentially a little hobby.
You can imagine where you come home in the evening and you can either stay up all night playing Halo, or you can be designing an HIV vaccine with people all around the world. I mean, which would you be happier saying you did when you went into work in the morning? People out there are discovering not only alternative protein structures, but new approaches to solving the problem. So they're really doing scientific research, even though most of the players are not practicing scientists.
The computers versus human paradox, as it were, is ultimately we're going to fold ourselves out of a game. We're here to provide a sort of refinement to the folding algorithms that protein servers use to try and do this automatically. As we get better and feed back to the Baker Lab, the automated algorithm for the computers will get better, and ultimately we'll be left with nothing to do.
I mean, this is really amazing. I just want to point out this Suzanne Litsky. I mean, I want to have someone, who has nothing to do with my research, talking about my research, with terms like adrenaline starts and I become a different person, and it has given me something that my everyday life hasn't given me. I mean, this is amazing. So this you can really do with games, and this is really possible. And I hope that I could have kind of convinced you actually that one might just think a little bit beyond the borders and for his own research or for her own research actually to achieve this. And you can really do also scientific impact. So there are at least 4 publications based on those folded players, and in particular one where the structure of HIV protease or protein found in the HIV virus has been solved by the folded players. And now now the pharma companies can produce drugs and medicine actually against HIV based on these structures. And with this, I would like to thank you a lot for the attention, and if you have questions, please go ahead and listen.